November 16, 2025. A nuclear-powered supercarrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, slipped through the Anegada Passage and entered the Caribbean Sea, positioning itself just a few hundred miles off the coast of Venezuela. Tensions between Washington and Caracas were already at a boiling point over allegations of narco-terror links and regional instability, and the arrival of the Ford marked the most visible signal yet of U.S. military resolve in the Western Hemisphere. The carrier, flagship of a full-strike group, did not merely arrive. It announced a new phase of naval power projection near Venezuela's northern coastline. In the weeks preceding the deployment, the U.S. Southern Command had expanded maritime patrols, repositioned F-35 fighters to Puerto Rico, and approved plans for intercepting vessels linked to the so-called Cartel de los Soles. The Ford's deployment was framed by Washington as a counter-narcotics and transnational criminal organization disruption mission. Yet the timing and location spoke far more loudly. The Eastern Caribbean, the Venezuelan maritime space, and the shadow of regime change rhetoric. The carrier's presence transformed the sea from a routine patrol area into a stage of high-stakes power politics. The Gerald R. Ford is not simply another aircraft carrier. At over 100,000 tons displacement and measuring 1,092 feet in length, she is the largest warship ever built for the U.S. Navy. A new class of nuclear-powered carriers, the Ford class promised to redefine naval aviation for decades ahead. Compared with the previous legacy Nimitz class, she could launch 25% more aircraft per day and required 25% fewer crew, thanks to advanced systems like the Electromagnetic Aircraft Launch System, EMALS, and dual-band radar, among others. Construction began in 2009 at Newport News Shipbuilding, and the Ford was officially delivered to the Navy on 22 July 2017. She carries the name of U.S. President Gerald R. Ford, the only person to serve as both Vice President and President, without being elected to either office. Her first deployments tested her systems in the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and the North Sea. Yet now, in the Caribbean Sea, off Venezuela, her mission was not merely about training. It was about influence, power, deterrence. With the carrier came her strike group, guided missile destroyers, supply ships, and a full air wing comprised of FA-18EF Super Hornets, E-2D Advanced Hawkeyes, EA-18G Growlers, and other high-end aircraft. The group's deployable reach, situational awareness, and multi-domain warfare capability turned the ship into more than a floating base. It became a roaming fortress of American naval power, Army recognition, +1. The operation near Venezuela served several purposes. First, deterrence, signaling that U.S. forces would respond to threats emanating from transnational criminal networks allegedly embedded within the Venezuelan state. Second, reassurance, showing allies and partners in the region that the United States remains committed to Western Hemisphere security. Third, readiness. By operating the carrier in challenging maritime conditions close to South America, the Navy sharpened its combat power projection and readiness for complex scenarios. Analysts noted that this deployment represented the largest U.S. naval buildup in the Caribbean since the Cuban Missile Crisis era, the war zone +1. Such a show of force demands not only diplomacy, but logistics and lethality. The Ford's catapult system allows up to 160+ sorties per day in optimal conditions, meaning dozens of combat missions, reconnaissance launches, electronic warfare sweeps, and deterrence patrols can flow steadily. Her dual-band radar gives her unprecedented detection range, while her advanced defensive systems protect her from missiles and torpedoes. Her very existence off the coast of Venezuela signals to any adversary. The United States can project air and sea power deeper, faster, and more decisively than ever before. To fully understand this ship, one must dive into the people behind it. Admiral John Slew Aquino, a longtime carrier strike group commander, famously remarked upon Ford's first operational deployment. "She is not just bigger, she is smarter and faster. The enemy now has less time to react." Captain Amy Iron Maiden. Bradshaw, the Ford's commanding officer, presides over a crew of more than 4,500 sailors and Marines, whose mission is to make the ship a war-winning asset every hour of every day. Engineers, aviators, deck crew specialists, and logistics planners all collaborate to keep the Ford's mission going, typically launching, recovering, and servicing aircraft around the clock. As the sun set on the ship's transit into the Caribbean, radar screens hummed and fighter jets roared toward Puerto Rican. Forward refueling bases from Norfolk to the Caribbean, the Ford's path traced an arc of strategic transformation, from testing and trials to real-world operations. The stakes were high, the mission clear, and the game had changed. The Gerald R. Ford's arrival in the Caribbean also highlighted something deeper, a shift in how modern naval power is used to shape political realities without firing a single shot. As the carrier strike group settled into its operating box north of Venezuela, regional governments took notice. Some expressed concern, others welcomed the move, but almost all understood the same message. This was a projection of capability, a reminder of the United States' ability to influence events far from its own shores. From the flight deck, the atmosphere felt different from earlier deployments. Sailors and aviators were intensely aware that this mission was not a routine exercise in the Atlantic or a training period near the Virginia Capes. Every takeoff, every patrol, every pass near Venezuelan airspace carried weight. The geopolitical tension was almost physical, woven into the noise of the catapults, the rush of jet wash, and the constant coordination between the carrier's air wing and Allied surveillance aircraft across the Caribbean. The Ford's electromagnetic launch system, once controversial due to early testing issues, now proved its worth as jets accelerated smoothly into the sky with less strain on airframes and far greater reliability than conventional steam catapults. Pilots described the launches as clean, predictable, and precisely controlled, allowing for more sorties with less downtime. The ship's arresting gear, also electromagnetic, returned aircraft to the deck with similar consistency. Together, these technologies reshaped the tempo of naval aviation, allowing the carrier to sustain a high pace of operations for days on end. Beyond the steel and electronics lay the human structure that made the Ford formidable. The ship's leadership maintained an intense rhythm of briefings, intelligence updates, and inter-service coordination. Analysts monitored regional communications, patterns of maritime traffic, and any sign of escalation. Flight deck crews worked long shifts under the tropical sun, moving aircraft with practiced choreography. Below deck, nuclear engineers oversaw the twin reactors that powered the entire ship, ensuring not only propulsion, but electricity for the Ford's advanced radar systems, sensors, and communication links. One of the most important elements of the Ford's mission near Venezuela was awareness, knowing who was moving, where, and why. Maritime patrol aircraft from the carrier, combined with drones and Allied assets, formed a vast surveillance network across the eastern Caribbean. They tracked suspicious vessels, monitored airspace behavior, and built patterns of activity that helped U.S. Southern Command understand the evolving situation on the ground. Every piece of information fed into a larger picture, helping leaders assess whether tensions were rising or stabilizing. Yet the Ford's purpose was not only intelligence, its presence had a deterrent effect that shifted the calculations of actors across the region. When a supercarrier arrives, with its strike group, its air wing, and its unmatched capability, it changes the psychology of any potential confrontation. Even without direct engagement, its overwhelming power silently communicates that any escalation would carry consequences far beyond regional boundaries. Although the Ford had seen deployments in the Mediterranean and North Atlantic, this mission marked one of the rare moments when a U.S. carrier of this class operated so close to South America. For many aboard, it was a reminder of how unpredictable global politics could be. One week, the carrier trained in the Atlantic. The next, it was part of a strategic posture near a tense geopolitical hotspot. Below deck, in the ship's intelligence center, specialists compared current conditions to earlier U.S. naval operations in the region. While nothing matched the scale of Cold War confrontations, the new challenges were modern, fluid, and complex. They involved networks, influence operations, and rapid shifts in alliances. The Caribbean was no longer simply a route for commercial shipping. It had become a zone where global interests intersected. The Ford's aircraft played a central role in maintaining stability. FA-18 Super Hornets flew patrol routes along international airspace lines, ensuring transparency and readiness. Electronic warfare aircraft monitored signals across vast distances. Helicopters conducted search and rescue drills and maritime tracking missions. Every flight was documented, analyzed, and woven into a broader defensive posture. The impact was clear. Maritime traffic altered course, unauthorized aircraft avoided sensitive zones, and regional governments recalculated their positions. The Ford did not need to fire missiles or launch major operations. Its presence alone reshaped behavior. While the deployment near Venezuela commanded headlines, the ship's legacy reached far beyond the Caribbean. To understand its true significance, one must step back into its origin story, how it was conceived, who envisioned it, and why it represents the future of U.S. naval power. The idea of a next-generation aircraft carrier emerged in the early 2000s, when the Navy sought to replace the aging Nimitz class with a ship capable of meeting new challenges. Increasing aircraft requirements, emerging missile threats, and advances in surveillance and electronic warfare demanded a carrier with far more power, efficiency, and resilience. This vision led to the Gerald R. Ford class program, named after the 38th President of the United States. The Ford was designed not just as a successor, but as a leap forward, a platform that could sustain higher sortie rates, operate more efficiently, and integrate seamlessly with advancing technologies. Its development involved thousands of engineers, naval architects, and military planners. Figures like Admiral Michael Mullen and later naval leaders championed the carrier as essential for maintaining American maritime dominance. As construction progressed, the Ford incorporated some of the most sophisticated defense systems ever placed on a ship. Its nuclear reactors provided nearly 3 times the electrical output of previous carriers, enabling future directed energy weapons and advanced sensors. Its hull design improved efficiency, while its flight deck layout reduced aircraft handling time. These changes, combined with survivability upgrades, created a vessel built not only for present missions, but for the next half-century of naval warfare. By the time the Ford sailed into the Caribbean in 2025, it had already proven itself in multiple deployments, testing operations in the Mediterranean, joint exercises with NATO allies, and carrier strike missions in the North Atlantic. Yet this moment was different. It was a demonstration of capability directly tied to rising geopolitical tension in the Western Hemisphere, a reminder that U.S. carriers remain central to American national security strategy. And as night fell across the Caribbean Sea, the Ford continued its vigil, its deck glowing under red lights, its aircraft positioned for high readiness, its crew fully aware that their mission mattered not just for deterrence, but for the message it sent around the world. As days passed in the Caribbean, the USS Gerald R. Ford settled into a rhythm that was both predictable and tense. The ship operated as a self-contained city, running flight operations, intelligence cycles, maintenance routines, and constant watch rotations. Every sailor aboard understood that even without direct conflict, their actions carried strategic weight. The presence of such a powerful vessel near Venezuela was not meant to provoke, but to shape decisions, quietly, firmly, unmistakably. Around the strike group, the ocean pulsed with activity. U.S. destroyers moved in coordinated patterns, forming a protective screen. Submarines monitored deep waters for unusual movement. Surveillance aircraft swept long arcs across the sea, painting a digital picture of everything within hundreds of miles. In the air, Super Hornets continued patrols. Electronic warfare aircraft tested detection ranges, and helicopters scanned shipping lanes for vessels tied to illicit networks. Behind the scenes, diplomatic and military signals intertwined. The carriers were not isolated machines, but tools woven into a broader strategy involving intelligence partnerships with Caribbean nations, interagency coordination, and communication channels designed to prevent escalation. The Ford's presence made one thing clear. The United States was committed to shaping stability in the region, and it possessed the technology and readiness to do so without resorting to force. Inside the carrier, life moved with the relentless tempo that only a warship of this scale can generate. Jet engines roared across the deck at all hours. The smell of fuel hung in the air. Elevators carried aircraft between hangar and flight deck with mechanical precision. On the bridge, officers monitored navigation displays and communication links, coordinating with destroyers spread across the ocean. Every department contributed to the ship's readiness. Medical teams, logistics crews, ordnance handlers, reactor specialists, cooks preparing meals for thousands, and engineers ensuring that systems as simple as plumbing and as complex as the reactor core worked in perfect harmony. The ship was vast, but no space was idle. Even the quiet corridors carried a sense of weight, as if the steel itself understood the seriousness of the mission. The Ford was not merely a tool of war, it was a symbol, and symbols matter in moments of tension. Sailors recognized that their work, while routine to them, carried meaning far beyond the hull. The carrier's origin story continued to echo through its mission. Gerald R. Ford himself, after whom the ship was named, served in the Navy during World War II aboard the USS Monterey. His legacy was one of integrity, calm leadership, and steady presence, qualities reflected in the very ship that bore his name. The Ford-class program, though costly and controversial in its early years, now stood as proof of what decades of engineering and vision could accomplish. And as it patrolled the Caribbean Sea, it fulfilled exactly what its designers intended: a vessel capable of facing modern threats and shaping modern geopolitics. While much attention focused on its advanced systems, the Ford's core strength remained its ability to project air power. Its combined aircraft, fighters, surveillance planes, helicopters, and electronic warfare platforms formed a mobile air force, ready to respond quickly to any development. Its operations near Venezuela illustrated how naval aviation can deter conflict through presence rather than confrontation. By the end of the deployment, regional tensions had cooled, partly due to diplomatic channels and partly due to the undeniable reality of the Ford strike group operating nearby nations adjusted their positions, dialogue reopened, and stability slowly returned. The carrier did not fire missiles or launch combat operations. Instead, it achieved its mission through posture, readiness, and the unmistakable influence of a 100,000-ton symbol of modern military capability. As the Gerald R. Ford prepared to depart the region, the ship served as a reminder of the evolving role of naval power in the 21st century. Modern conflicts often unfold in gray zones, where deterrence and presence matter more than open battle. And in those spaces, a supercarrier becomes not just a war machine, but a diplomatic instrument, silent, imposing, and decisive. In the end, the USS Gerald R. Ford carried out its mission exactly as designed. It shaped events, influenced decisions, and maintained stability through strength. Its time in the Caribbean left a clear message to allies and rivals alike. The world's most advanced aircraft carrier is not defined only by what it can destroy, but by what it can prevent. Before we wrap up, I want to know something simple from you. Power or presence? Which do you think matters more in a ship like this? Let me know your one-word answer in the comments. And if you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.